हेलो चिल्ड्रन, वेलकम बैक। एंड आज के इस वीडियो में हम लोग बात करेंगे एक्सेस डिमांड एंड डेफिशिएंट डिमांड, causes of excess demand and how to overcome this excess demand problem. Okay, so first of all, let's try to understand what is this excess demand. As the name implies that the demand is excess with in comparison to supply. So let's try to find out the definition of this. It is a situation where aggregate demand is more than aggregate supply at full level of employment. You must use this word full level of employment because this is the key word. I mean, here nobody is unemployed in the country and all the resources are fully utilized. So in this situation, when the demand, the aggregate demand, the sum total of the demand of the country is greater than aggregate supply, so this situation is known as excess demand. Okay, and increase in demand is due to a lot of factors. Like the first factor is increase in output. अगर कंट्री में अगर प्रोडक्शन ज़्यादा हो गया तो ऑब्वियसली there may be an increase in demand. There may be due to the employment. अगर कंट्री में अगर एम्प्लॉयमेंट अगर ज़्यादा हो गए, काफ़ी लोग एम्प्लॉयड हो गए तो इनकम ज़्यादा आई तो definitely they will demand more goods and services. And the other is prices, because prices and demand, they have an inverse relation. So if the prices of goods and services falls, so definitely there will be an excess demand. Okay, and this excess demand results in an inflationary gap. So basically this excess demand creates a gap. So that gap is called inflationary gap, and this gap measures the degree and size of excess demand. So how much is the difference, is the degree, is the size of this excess demand. So that is measured by inflationary gap. So always remember that inflationary gap is related with excess demand, and greater this gap, greater the gap, greater will be the size of excess demand. So this point should also be learned by you. Now let's try to understand this diagram where on the x-axis we have income, output and employment, and on the y-axis we have demand, aggregate demand, AD. And as you can see here, this point E is the equilibrium point, and now this point shifts towards upward to F. Okay, as you can see here, so this point is F. So this is excess demand. So the new equilibrium point here is F due to excess demand. This is on the y-axis, we are representing aggregate demand. So originally the demand was here, now it has been increased to this much. So this creates an excess demand, and this is known as inflationary gap, EF. So this gap is called inflationary gap. So like this you can represent. Now let's try to find out why this excess demand occurs in the country. So the first point you can write in your answer is increase in the investment. Now due to increase in the investment, what happens? Like more goods and services are produced in the country, more employment is done, and that increases the factor incomes, and accordingly that increases the consumption expenditure of the household. So that increases the demand. The second point is increase in government expenditure. If government gives more subsidies to farmers, if government spends a lot of money on the infrastructure development, so that will definitely makes people more employed, more income, more investment and more demand. Third is increase in export demand. If there is an export demand, if there is an increase, so in that way also, like we can say that there are chances of excess demand. Okay, the fourth point is increase in money supply. If the RBI increases the money supply in the country, so that leads to more money with the people. So लोगों के पास में अगर ज़्यादा पैसा आ गया तो ऑब्वियसली दे विल डिमांड मोर एंड मोर ऑफ गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज। फिफ्थ पॉइंट बहुत ऑब्वियस है, बहुत कॉमन पॉइंट है, इंक्रीज इन इनकम। इफ द इनकम ऑफ द पीपल राइजेस सो दैट विल रिजल्ट इन एक्सेस डिमांड। बहुत ही सिंपल पॉइंट है इनकम वाला, तो इजीली यू कैन लर्न। एंड सिक्स्थ पॉइंट इज रिडक्शन इन टैक्सेस। अगर जैसे अभी इंडिया में जीएसटी है, टैक्स, मेन टैक्स, तो ये अगर डिक्रीज कर देती है गवर्नमेंट तो ऑब्वियसली द पीपल विल बी अट्रैक्टेड टुवर्ड्स बाइंग मोर एंड मोर ऑफ गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज, है ना। सो दीज आर द फ्यू कॉजेस ऑफ excess of demand. Now let's see कि what is the impact of excess of demand on the economy. So the first point is increase in the production due to full employment of resources. As we know, this is a case of full employment, and here due to excess demand all the resources available in the country are fully utilized for the production. The second point is increase in employment due to rise in demand, output and income. So here due to rise in demand the firms will start producing more output, and if there are more output that will lead to factor incomes. More factor income leads to more consumption expenditure by the household. So like that सारे interrelated हैं. Okay, जो third impact of excess demand is the increase in inflation ड्यू टू एक्सेस डिमांड। ये भी बहुत बढ़िया पॉइंट है कि अगर ज़्यादा डिमांड हो गई तो दैट मे रिजल्ट इन द राइज इन द प्राइस लेवल और इन एन इकोनॉमी। ओके, आगे चलते हैं। मेजर्स टू करेक्ट excess demand. So how the government can control excess demand in an economy? So basically there are two measures taken by the government. One is monetary measure, the other is fiscal measure. तो मॉनेटरी मेजर्स में स्पेशली मनी सप्लाई को कंट्रोल करती है, फिस्कल मेजर्स में टैक्सेस को कंट्रोल करती है। तो ये दिमाग में आपके रहने चाहिए। ओके, सबसे पहले देखते हैं मॉनेटरी मेजर्स। तो जो पहला पॉइंट है दैट इज बाय रिड्यूसिंग द सप्लाई ऑफ करेंसी नोट्स इन द कंट्री द गवर्नमेंट कैन कंट्रोल एक्सेस डिमांड। सिंपली है कि अगर करेंसी सप्लाई, अगर मनी सप्लाई को अगर कंट्रोल करती है तो द पीपल विल हैव लेस एंड लेस ऑफ मनी एंड दैट लीड्स टू लेसर डिमांड। द सेकंड पॉइंट इज बाय इंक्रीजिंग द बैंक रेट्स सो दैट the banks will not be able to give more loans to the people, and as a result the public will not have that surplus money to spend. So this is one thing, currency note, bank rates. The third is by selling the securities in the open market operations. Already ये सारे कंट्रोल हम लोगों ने प्रीवियस चैप्टर में किए हुए हैं। ओके, तो ओपन मार्केट ऑपरेशंस भी कर सकती है। यहाँ पे गवर्नमेंट अपने जो सिक्योरिटीज़ है वो सेल कर सकती है। सो अगर सेल करेगी तो ऑब्वियसली द गवर्नमेंट विल टेक अवे एक्स्ट्रा मनी फ्रॉम द पीपल, सो दैट रिजल्ट्स इन लोअर डिमांड। The fourth point is by increasing the legal reserve requirements. तो legal reserve requirement की जब हम लोग बात करते हैं तो we should remember CRR and SLR. तो कैश रिजर्व रेशियो एंड स्टैट्यूटरी रिजर्व रेशियो, इनको इंक्रीज कर देती है RBI टू कंट्रोल मनी सप्लाई, and by increasing the repo and reverse repo rate. This is also we have already discussed. This is a good measure, a good system of controlling the money supply. So by increasing it we can decrease the money supply in the country. And lastly, by moral suasion, that is advising the banks not to lend money. So this is called moral suasion. This point also we have discussed earlier. So this is how the monetary measures work in a country. Now let's see some fiscal measures. How with the help of fiscal measures the government can correct excess demand. So the first point here is by imposing more taxes, thereby making the goods and services expensive. So it's very simple to understand कि अगर goods and services पे ज़्यादा taxes impose करने लग गई government, so obviously that will make the goods and services costly, and the people will not be attracted to buy the goods. So they will buy less and less of goods and services. The second point is by reducing the public expenditure and investment. This is also very good tool with the government. कि पब्लिक एक्सपेंडिचर जो है ऑन द ट्रांसपोर्टेशन, ऑन द वेयर हाउसेस, ऑन द वेलफेयर एक्टिविटीज़, ऑन द इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर, इसको अगर गवर्नमेंट रिड्यूस कर देती है तो ऑब्वियसली एम्प्लॉयमेंट एंड जो आउटपुट लेवल है कंट्री में दैट विल रिड्यूस. So that leads to control of excess demand. And the third is public borrowing by RBI. Sometimes RBI uses this policy that it borrows money from the people by issuing bonds. So in that way they take away the extra purchasing power from the people. Okay children, आगे चलते हैं नेक्स्ट कॉन्सेप्ट में डेफिशिएंट डिमांड के तरफ. व्हाट इज दिस डेफिशिएंट डिमांड? And basically it is just the opposite of excess demand. It is a situation where aggregate demand is less than the aggregate supply at full level of employment. You must remember these keywords, and it is also known as underemployment equilibrium because some factors remain unemployed, and that is why this situation arises. So there is a deficient demand, and the gap between the demand and the supply, so that is called deflationary. In excess demand we have inflationary gap, in deficient demand we have deflationary gap. तो यहाँ पर इस सिचुएशन में सप्लाई, कंट्री में सप्लाई बहुत ज़्यादा हो जाती है, डिमांड कम हो जाती है, तो दैट क्रिएट्स अ प्रॉब्लम एंड दिस इज कॉल्ड डिफ्लेशनरी गैप और deficient demand. Okay, let's see some important features of deflationary gap. The first one is AD is less than AS at full employment level. Simple hai, no problem with that. The second one is there is involuntary unemployment in the country, which means people fail to find jobs at the prevailing wage rate. तो ये भी एक बड़ी प्रॉब्लम है, इनवॉलंटरी प्रॉब्लम क्रिएट होती है यहाँ पे. एंड थर्डली prices of commodities fall and there is a deflation in the country. तो my dear friends, एक चीज़ मैं आपको बता दूं कि इन्फ्लेशन को कंट्रोल किया जा सकता है, बट डिफ्लेशन इज़ वेरी हार्ड टू कंट्रोल बाय द गवर्नमेंट. नाउ इट इज़ अ वेरी डेंजरस सिचुएशन बेसिकली. ओके, तो इसके बारे में आगे पढ़ेंगे बाद में. नाउ लेट्स ट्राई टू फाइंड आउट द डिफरेंट कॉजेज ऑफ डेफिशिएंट डिमांड और डिफ्लेशनरी गैप इन एन कंट्री. ये भी जस्ट अपोजिट है एक्सेस डिमांड का, एंड यहाँ पे आपको वहाँ पे इंक्रीज था, यहाँ पे ये सारे डिक्रीज वर्ड यूज़ करने हैं, राइट. जैसे यहाँ पे डिक्रीज इन इन्वेस्टमेंट एक्सपेंडिचर हो गया, डिक्रीज इन गवर्नमेंट एक्सपेंडिचर हो गया, डिक्रीज इन एक्सपोर्ट डिमांड, डिक्रीज इन कंजप्शन ऑफ डिमांड, डिक्रीज इन मनी सप्लाई एंड इंक्रीज इन टैक्सेस. सो लाइक दिस. सो दीज आर बेसिकली द कॉजेज. तो अगर आप इन्फ्लेशनरी गैप वाले कॉजेज अगर लर्न कर लेते हो तो डेफिनेटली यू कैन ईजिली लर्न द कॉजेज ऑफ डिफ्लेशनरी गैप. ओके, नाउ लेट्स मूव ऑन टू दिस ग्राफ. Okay, so this graph as you can see here एकदम सेम डिटो ग्राफ है, नो प्रॉब्लम विद दैट. एक्सिस एक्स एक्सिस पे इनकम आउटपुट एम्प्लॉयमेंट, वाई एक्सिस पे एग्रीगेट डिमांड, एंड दिस इज द ओरिजिनल इक्विलिब्रियम पॉइंट E एंड इट फॉल्स डाउन टू C. तो यहाँ पे ये जो नया इक्विलिब्रियम पॉइंट है, so this is sorry, not this one F. तो F is the new equilibrium point and generally it is down. तो ये नीचे आ गया because there is deflationary gap, because the demand decreases. यहाँ पे demand decrease कर रही है. So this gap, ये जो gap है, so this gap is called deflationary gap. So like this, बहुत simple है. एंगल को ध्यान में रखिए ऑलवेज. जो सेविंग जो SS curve है that should be of 45 degree. Now let's see the few impact of this deficient demand on the economy. There will be fall in the employment opportunities. The people will be unemployed. ये बड़ी problem है. Second, there will be deflation in the country. That means the prices of goods and services will fall. And thirdly, there will be decrease in the production of goods and services due to lack of investment. तो ये भी एक बड़ी प्रॉब्लम है कि प्रोड्यूसर्स के पास में पैसे नहीं होंगे इन्वेस्टमेंट के लिए, एंड देयरफॉर दे विल प्रोड्यूस लेस एंड लेस. ओके, नाउ बात करते हैं मेजर्स की, हाउ टू कंट्रोल दिस डेफिशिएंट डिमांड इन एन इकोनॉमी. सेम टू सिस्टम्स, वन इज मॉनेटरी सिस्टम, द अदर इज फिस्कल सिस्टम, जस्ट रिवर्स अपोजिट ऑफ दैट. यहाँ पे इंक्रीज इन मनी सप्लाई बाय RBI, then reducing the bank rates so that people will have more loans and more money in their pocket. Third one, by promoting consumer credit and loans by the commercial banks, by decreasing the repo and reverse repo rates, by decreasing the CRR and SLR ratios, and by purchasing the securities from the open market operation. So in this way, the RBI and the government can increase the supply of money in the market, and thereby that will increase the purchasing power of the consumers. And in the fiscal measures, the first one is by adopting deficient financing. Now what is this? By borrowing from RBI and other countries. So that is called deficient financing. So the government, when it doesn't have sufficient fund, it can borrow from other countries, and the commercial bank can borrow from RBI. So like that, they try to circulate more and more money in the market. The second point is by reducing the taxes so that consumers will have more purchasing power and they can purchase more, they can demand more. Okay. Third is by increasing the public expenditure and investment. So in that way, the government can, increase the infrastructures and the other things in the country, and thereby the output level in the country can be increased, and the people will start consuming more and more of goods and services. Okay. This difference you can revise for the exam between deficient demand and excess demand. And it's simple. First you can write the definition of both, then it leads to deflationary gap, whereas it leads to inflationary gap, already we have discussed. And here aggregate demand is less than aggregate supply, and here aggregate demand is more than aggregate supply. And in cases of deficient demand, the output prices and employment decreases, and here in excess demand all these things increases. So my dear friends, by this we come to an end of this chapter, and from the next video we'll be starting chapter 5, government budget and the economy. Thank you very much for watching this video, and a very best of luck.